Hello everyone, and welcome to this video which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we're taking a look at the game between Stoofvlees-Berserk, TCEC Cup 10, round 32. Stoofvlees has always been one of my favourite engines, the Morozevich of the engine world, as I always called it. But yeah, last season it just seemed a little bit flatter, a bit of the sparkle was gone. But well, this season it seems to be back, and the cup matches against Berserk and Nemorino so far have been really good. This game is a game from the match against Berserk, and well, features some yeah, amazing play from both engines. So let's get into it. How did this opening come about? Well, it was a slightly unusual Dutch. So d4, f5, bishop g5. Yeah, you can't call this an offbeat move. It's one of the main lines nowadays. Just dissuades black from playing a knight to f6 because you can give black double pawns after that. d6, slightly unusual reaction, and knight c3 is not the most common move either, but it's very logical, just looking to play e4. Again, knight f6, bishop f6 gives black horrific double pawns there. So black plays h6, bishop f4, tempting the black g-pawn forward, and it comes with g5 and bishop d2. And yeah, I mean, it's just one of those questions really, you know, is the expansion that black has made on the king side with h6 and g5, is that positive? Or is it just creating a lot of weaknesses? You could, you know, first of all that, well, the square on h5 is quite weak. e4 and queen h5 will be definitely a possible threat there. Now Berserk played a quite amazing move that, yeah, never occurred to me in my wildest dreams, and I don't think would occur to many human players, except if they'd looked at a computer. The move is queen d7. What on earth is the idea of queen d7? There's two ideas, first of all. I mean, first of all, you know, black might well consider trying to castle queenside, but it's not 100% easy to get all the pieces out of the way in order to do that, the knight, the bishop and the queen. So, well, black has to find a spot for its queen, basically, and queen d7 is making a start on that. At the same time, it's also countering some of white's other plans. So, for example, the idea of queen d7 is to meet e4 with simply f takes e4. Now, there's 2 points to it. Queen h5 check. Of course, I can play king d8. Haha! Queen d7 has freed d8 for the king. And knight takes e4 can be met by this move, queen e6. And the big problem for white is that well, there's you've got to do something and defend that knight on e4, but d5 is coming as well, pinning the knight to the king. So white has to play a move like queen e2, and here the engines were thinking simply that bishop g7, and then eventually something like knight f6, knight c6 was going to be perfectly fine for black, despite the king on d8. You know, the queen will move, the bishop will come out to f5, and black will have decent development. The one thing as well is that you know, after a move like c3, white can't actually castle queenside because there's queen takes a2. So actually getting these pieces developed is tougher than you might think. Still, you know, feels really ropey to me, but yeah, my engines were pretty happy with that move. So pretty impressive. I mean, there's some other moves as well. I mean, knight f6, well, just runs into e4 in actual fact, so that's less good because after fe, knight e4, queen h5 check, we just pick up the knight, and of course we've forced the black king to move, and well, it's not the same as having it on d8 really. You know, we've got queen g6 check, white's threatened to castle queenside, very dangerous. One idea that's maybe a little bit better is bishop g7, and here in actual fact Stockfish against Dragon, and also Dragon as white, they were quite keen on e4, you know, which ends up being a pawn sacrifice, actually a double pawn sacrifice, which looks really dangerous to me for black. But yeah, but the engines were generally managing to hold a draw from this position. But still, you know, I mean, I would much rather be white in this position. So queen d7, an amazing move there. So in the game, Stoofvlees went h4, g4, and then e4. So weakening the black king side, getting the f4 square for the knight, not bothering about that queen h5 check, funnily enough. F takes c4, and now knight e2. So white's not going to play knight e4 because, again, queen e6 is very decent, apparently. Queen e2, knight c6, bishop c3, bishop g7 castles, knight f6 was a game stockfish against dragon, which soon ended in a draw, you know. And in fact, yeah, you know, black's quite decent there. I mean, bishop f5, castle queenside, maybe get an e5 afterwards. You know, what's wrong with black's position? Not very much, really. So Stoofvlees played knight e2, and we're just leaving that pawn on e4. We're going to get our knight out. We're going to start aiming at those weakened light squares on the king side. The result of playing h6 and g5. Knight f6, knight f4, and yeah, now some nice moves. Knight c6, hitting the pawn on d4, completely ignoring any possible threat of knight g6. Yeah, I mean, after knight g6, we just go rook h7 and ignore it, just as just what happens in the game, basically. So bishop e3 was played by Stoofvlees, e5, knight g6, rook h7, d5, knight e7, and now quite a surprising move. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, really, I think the pretty standard human move, the one that you'd look at first would be to take the bishop with a knight, just get the bishop pair. But I suppose it does actually free up the black king side a little bit. You know, the king can come here, then come to g7. This knight's going to come to f5. Yeah, it doesn't look so bad for black in principle. So what Stoofvlees did was play this move, knight takes c7. And the idea is if bishop takes c7, we'll go queen d2 and gain a tempo, hitting that pawn. So queen takes c7 was played by Berserk, and now queen d2. Let's stop a moment to have a look at this position. It's pretty complicated. I mean, black's a pawn up, this e4 pawn, but you know, white's contention is that most probably white will be able to pick it up later at some stage. And of course, you know, on the downside, what it does is that it takes away all sorts of squares from the black pieces. You know, black can't use the e4 square, for example, or a light square bishop on f5 isn't actually attacking anything at all. Where would white be looking to make some progress? Well, really, it's not stupid to look to make progress on the queen side. You know, try and maybe move up this this a pawn, because black doesn't have very many pieces on the queen side at all. So potential for gaining space there, pretty good. Another idea, and we're going to see that that's what Stoofvlees went for in the game, is just to play f3, try and break open the king side, and then, you know, just expose and invade through the light squared weaknesses that you've created, for example, g6. Yeah, key question is, where is the black king going to go? Is the black king going to go on the queen side or on the king side? A difficult one there. To be honest, I ended up being surprised by both. I think, you know, if you go castle queen side, you don't have many pieces to defend your king. If you go king side, well, I don't know, with the pawn already on g4, feels a bit risky, but probably king side is the safest. And that's actually what Berserk went for. So queen d2, king f7 straight away. Yeah, so in my engine games between Dragon and Dragon 3 and Stockfish on my 94 thread machine, they were quite keen on ideas like bishop d7 c6, just getting rid of this pawn first of all. Feels a little bit funny to open up the centre, to be honest, because I think that white's more active. So I do quite like this plan, just of king f7, keeping it tight at the back, developing, getting your king tucked away somewhere around to h8, and then afterwards, you know, looking to take some action. That does feel more more logical to me. So bishop e2, king g8, castles, king h8. There's a shogi castle called the Anaguma, where you move your lance up one move. Lance is a sort of a mini rook, and then move the king behind. This is pretty similar, really. Yeah, always funny when you see parallels like that between different games. So king b1, and now bishop f5. Again, Berserk not looking for c6 that Dragon was very keen on, but again keeping the whole structure quite tight. And now Stoofvlees decided no messing around on the queen side, no a4s, no gaining space there. Just decided to play f3 and blast open the kingside position, and that feels very, very reasonable. We're going to have the open G and F files to point at black's pieces. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weak points in the black king side. For example, this pawn on h6 seems like you need to keep your rook on h7 a bit passive to defend it. And well, getting this one into the defence is not 100% easy. And of course, there's no counterplay at all against white's king. So yeah, really, I like Stoofvlees' position a lot here as white, even though the engines were not amazingly keen on white's position. Advantage, but nothing decisive. So e takes f3, gf, gf, bishop takes f3. Now, actually, in this position, Berserk played knight g4, which is very, very reasonable. Actually, moves like rook f7 were being played by Dragon and Stockfish, Stockfish in particular, just giving up this h6 pawn, which seemed like such a strange defence. But the idea simply is to regroup a little bit. So the rook goes to the open f file, and the bishop comes back to h7 to block, and then afterwards this rook is going to come here. Still looks a bit fraught, but this control that you have over the e4 square kind of stops the white minor pieces from getting too close to the black king. And as long as the knight doesn't land on g5, then black's probably going to be fine. Again, yeah, these are really difficult decisions to take as a human player. I mean, you do often see them, and say, I could do that, I suppose. But you're really always uncertain about giving away pawns, because it's a very definitive thing, really. Once you've given away the pawn, you're not going to get it back. And you're often thinking, well, could I try and survive with my material rather than just give it back? But obviously the engines don't have any compunction about this. They can assess quite accurately what other variations look like, and they can see whether it's worth giving up a pawn or not. But Berserk didn't do it. I mean, Berserk played knight g4, which is pretty reasonable. Just get some of those defensive pieces off the f-file before they're a target, get the two bishops, and, well, I mean, the light squares are the weakest point in the king side. So swapping off white's light squared bishop is, pretty reasonable. Rook df1, bishop g7, queen g2. We're just bringing our major pieces to the king side. And black can't really maintain a block on the g-file. If you play h5, then knight e4 to g5. What we said earlier, you mustn't let a knight get to g5. I mean, it's very dangerous. Once you go knight to g5, you've even got a queen e4 on top of it, attacking the rook on h7. And of course, the knight on g5 and rook on f1 combine against the f7 square. So that's really too dangerous. So the bishop has to move. h5 is not stupid. d7 is what Berserk chose, and that's pretty good too. Rook g1, rook f8, and now Stoofvlees really starts going for it. So rook takes, queen takes, rook f1. And, just looking at the position, I mean, black's a pawn up, got the two bishops. But I suppose the one huge problem for black is this rook on h7, which is, just completely immobilized. And, well, the fact that this rook is on h7, it means that, well, white's got all sorts of possibilities of invading on along the f-file, which, yeah, you wouldn't normally expect him to have. So, yeah, black's still got to be very, very accurate here. And of course, the point is this knight gets into e4 as well. So, very, 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 very strong play for white. So here Berserk played queen takes h4, which was obviously very brave, and white replied with queen g6. Now, yeah, I mean, we're already starting to tee up some ideas like rook f7, knight f6. So, yeah, already getting pretty dangerous. Queen d8 played by Berserk. And now it gets really, really fun. Actually, probably these lines were assessed by the engines as basically equal. But, to human players, it looks so unbelievably dangerous. Bishop g5. Bishop g5. Now, this bishop can't be taken because we've got hg, knight takes g5. We're threatening queen h7. And if you go queen g8, then simply knight f7 check wins the queen. So bishop g5 is just, the bishop can't be taken. So black plays queen e8, very reasonable, just trying to swap off that queen on g6. What does white do? Well, you don't want to swap off the queens, do you? So you play rook to f7. Yeah, sort of both a defensive and an attacking move. Obviously defensive, stopping the exchange of queens, and also teeing up on the bishop on g7. However, there's a slight drawback to this move, and this is h takes g5. The bishop can be taken now because knight g5 allows back rank mate with rook h1. We should have gone a4, a5 earlier. Actually, if we had actually thrown those moves in earlier, then yeah, all of this would have worked quite beautifully. So h takes g5. So we need to do something about the back rank before we can take on g5 with a knight. There's various possibilities. Stoofvlees played b3, which of course will turn out to be the best move. If you play a3, funnily enough, black plays bishop a4. And, well, the sneaky point to it, there's 2 points. If I do something like b3, for example, black just sacrifices and then goes for the perpetual. And, well, queen d3, together with a possible rook h1, that's not going to be any more than perpetual for white. In actual fact, what my engines were doing was giving up the rook in order to create a perpetual from the white side. The other idea is after bishop a4, if I go knight f6, which looks incredibly strong, forking queen and rook, you can't play bishop f6 because of queen takes h7. Then there's this very annoying move, bishop takes c2, whack. Queen takes c2 allows rook h1 check, king a2, queen f7, very important, this rook h1 check, moving the rook out of the attack of the knight and queen with tempo so that you can take something else. And king takes c2, queen a4 check is actually going to lead to mate. The queen and the rook on h7 will combine somewhere to deliver mate against the white king. So that's why white plays b3. That's the safest way of giving the king a bit of luft. g4. Black just ignoring it completely. And yeah, why don't you play a move like knight g5, for example? Well, you just go rook h1 check, king b2, and queen g8. And you kind of got yourself covered. And, well, there's also stuff like e4 check coming in, which is going to be rather unpleasant. For example, rook takes d7, I go e4. You try and escape with king a3. I've got bishop b2 check. Oops. So actually what Stoofvlees had to do was to give itself even a little bit more room. So a3 in order now to play king a2, and then afterwards you're going to come in. It's quite amazing, isn't it? So much preparation that you need to take in order to do that. So g3 from Berserk, just moving this pawn up, trying to distract this queen away from the defense of the rook on f7. So what does white do here? Well, knight f6 would be absolutely joyful, of course, if you could do it. But there's the very strong, again, bishop f5. So after queen f5, we've managed to distract the queen from the defense of the rook on f7. So we've again got our rook h1 check, king a2, queen f7 trick. So that explains why finally Stouf plays king a2, getting out of a possible rook h1 check. So now these are huge threats. These are really big. And if you go g2, well, simply knight f6, bishop f5, queen f5, we've got no check, so that means that queen f7, queen h7 check will be mate. So now Berserk has to take some action and plays the move queen g8, really curling up into a ball there. And this is where it gets really amazing, because this is just so, would be so difficult for a human to, you know, to really understand properly how whether this is surviving or not. So rook takes d7, and now bishop h6. And, well, the basic idea here is that this g-pawn is so strong that you can allow white to play queen takes g8, king g8, knight f6 to pick up a rook with check, give a check, and there's nothing that white can do to stop this g-pawn. So the best thing that white has got is a perpetual. I mean, it's quite amazing, really, you know, that white can just take a whole rook with check, and it doesn't make any difference. This bishop, you know, and well, and the king, they all combine to, yeah, deal with all the squares that that white might have to get back into and protect the advance of the g-pawn. So, and I think the idea after here and here, rook g8, which looks vaguely tempting, is that we can just go bishop f4. We protect the pawn, and then afterwards, yeah, you can't defend the knight, so we're going to take on there, and we'll have 2 pawns and a huge g pawn for the exchange. I mean, probably black's winning there. So bishop h6 played, quite amazing resource. Queen f6, bishop g7. Draw by perpetual? Nah, we're not finished yet. Queen f5. So we're just getting out of the attack of the queen after bishop h6, and we're threatening knight g5. So again, very dangerous threat. And now a really quite amazing idea. Again, whether you'd spot this defense as a human player, thinking that this is move 36, you might not have much time. I'm not sure. Bishop h6, again, quite astounding, this one. Because it just frees up this fork, knight f6, you know, queen g8, rook h7. How can black possibly be surviving this? But there's the amazing resource here, rook f7. And the queen's still on prise, but the rook is pinning the knight to the queen. And yeah, somehow this rook is also blocking any of these attacks against h7. Black's just got just enough firepower to do everything he needs to. And of course, you know, if you don't do anything, then g2 to g1 is happening. This g-pawn is going to run. So Stoofvlees played queen e6, and now the absolute key tactical point to it all, queen g6. And yeah, somehow white never managed to quite get a really safe spot for the king, because after queen f7 we've got queen takes c2 check, king a1, queen d1, and it's a draw by perpetual. White mustn't wander onto a dark square, of course, otherwise we're going to have to start worrying about bishop c1. But as long as we go king a2 and king a1, then no problem at all. You can even give away some pawns if you want. No worries, it's just a draw. So there we are. I mean, a really fantastic game. It's a draw, you know, so sometimes those sort of games get forgotten somehow because you focus on the wins. But I thought this one was absolutely stunning. And I mean, the opening was amazing. Great concept from Berserk, queen d7. And then afterwards, yeah, Stoofvlees' play was really, really nice. I mean, I love the you know, the blasting open of the king's side, and then all of these dangerous tactics. You know, queen g6, bishop g5, and the defense is simply incredible. You know, I mean, rook f7, h takes g5. This idea of pushing the g pawn, g4 to g3, and all these ideas like bishop h6, where you just free the f6 square for the opponent's knight. Looks, you know, absolutely decisive, but still, you know, this g-pawn saves the day. Really incredible play. Well, there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. Do keep on watching the TCEC. The cup's happening at the moment, and we're going to get into the quarterfinals soon. There's going to be some great matchups. If you enjoyed this video, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel so that you're notified of all future videos. I'm not quite back up to a video a day rhythm, but yeah, definitely going to be regularly producing videos on the channel all about these great engine games. I've got a huge backlog now of candidates from the Cup. And why not take a look at my book, The Silicon Road Chess Improvement, full of fantastic engine analysis and lots of tips for working with engines. But thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you at the next video.